Guys, and welcome to this strategy session. You've probably already recognized this little logo in the bottom, and maybe even the fact that we've got a business model canvas here. So what my aim is today is not to tell you all about Apple. You probably know far more than I do. What we're going to do is we're going to use this as an example as to how to start looking at your business model so that you can reassess your strategy, change what you do so that you can grow the business faster and get more insights as to how to do that. So what we're going to do today, we're going to focus on three parts of the business model canvas. We're going to focus on the value propositions, the cost structure, and the revenue streams. And basically what I really want you to do today is to think about your own business model canvas. If you haven't got one, spend a few minutes now, press pause, download the business model canvas, write yours out, and then unpause and carry on. What we're going to do today is I'm going to start asking you some questions about the different aspects of the business model canvas, about your value proposition, your cost structure, and your revenue streams, to start challenging the way that you're looking at the business model and the way that you're making money and delivering value. And the reason I do this is that when we start off a company, we'll often head in one particular direction. A few months, few years later, once the company has grown, we've got a fair amount of revenue coming in, many things will have changed, but our mental model of the business may not have changed as much as it should have done. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and ask some provocative questions to start getting you to start shifting your frame of reference, the way that you look at the business, asking you questions, and hopefully some of those questions are going to start making you think, ooh, what would happen if I did this? Should I do that? How can I do this? So we've got, I think, 16 questions to do. We're going to try and whip through this in about half an hour, 40 minutes, which means about 2 minutes per question. So I'm going to talk fairly quickly. If at any time you want to pause, do go ahead and take it from there. So the first part of it, our value propositions are well aligned with our customer needs. Are your value propositions well aligned with your customer needs, or is there a big gap? What we're basically doing here is some gap analysis. It's looking at each of your different value propositions. Let me just highlight these. Let's do them in yellow. Yep. And we're saying, okay, how much do those match exactly what the customer wants? So the customer has got, obviously they've got a problem. How much do these solve the problem that the customer has? Now, in this case, we're looking at Apple. Think Different. That came out in 1984 when Apple was serving a very niche market. Now they're serving very much a mass market. How much does Think Different as a value proposition satisfy the problems, the needs that the mass market has? My feeling is this is possibly no longer so relevant. Does it need updating? Smooth design is part of the value proposition that has come to the fore in recent years. So you ask yourself, what has changed? How can I really make sure that everything is aligned? And if it's not aligned, what should I do? Should this part of the value proposition be chopped? If the customer has changed where they are, and remember, customers do move quite quickly in response to trends and fads and the environment, do you need to change your value proposition? What's still relevant? What can you chuck? What more do you need to add? So that was the first question. Value propositions, are they well aligned with our customer needs? The second question that we're going to ask is, our value propositions, back to these again, do they have strong network effects? So in this case, what we're talking about, the network effect. If you've just got, say, one fax machine, it's pretty useless. If you've got two, it's not very well, you can only 2 people can talk to each other. If you've got 1,000, you've got 1,000 times 999 times 998 connections, etc., all the way down. If you've got 1 million people using a fax machine, it's a lot more. If you've got 1 billion, wow, you're starting to get some amazing connectivity between different users. Where can we find network effects, or are there absolutely no network effects at all? And one of the questions I ask for you is, okay, if you've got no network effects, head out there, have a look at your competitors. Have they managed to find any network effects that they're using to gain advantage? One of Google's, no, that's not a network effect. So a classic network effect would be Uber. The more drivers it's got, the more cars it's got, the more customers it can get, and it grows faster and faster. Again, with Google, the more people use search, the more money it has into to get the search results better. Therefore, it manages to zoom up really, really quickly. Okay, the next one. Are there strong synergies between our products and services? So focusing here a little bit on Apple, because we've got this example, you can see that the smooth design and the usability go very well together. In some cases they're not too distinct, and then these tie nicely into the brand. A lot of the status that you get from owning an Apple phone comes because it is awesomely smooth and its usability. Yeah, less so from the Think Different, because in many ways Apple phones are not as good as Samsung or Huawei phones, Xiaomi phones even. So this is what you need to think. Can you find ways of developing synergies between what you're offering? And if you can, that can often mean you're able to extract more revenue from customers. So for example, a car dealership has a maintenance workshop on site. That means that you get the new buy customers can be directed to the maintenance workshop, and then people in the maintenance workshop are constantly being reminded that you're also selling new cars. So you end up getting far more sales and far more revenue maintenance than you would if you had 2 separate standalone businesses. They both benefit each other's. What can your business do to expand or enhance any existing synergies? And if you don't have any synergies, why don't you have any synergies? There can be good reasons not to, but then that increases the overall cost basis of your company. And then the final question that I'm going to look at on the value proposition assessment are our customers very satisfied, or do we have lots of complaints? Okay, there's lots of reasons why this may happen, but think back for a moment and think, how satisfied are your customers? Do you have a clear metric that says how happy they are? Do you use Net Promoter or something similar? Or is it just a feeling that you've got? If it's just a feeling, is that good enough? What are your competitors doing? Again, take this back to your competitors, because you're always looking for competitive advantage. How can you know whether your customers are happier or sadder than your competitors? And if you know why they're happy, or if you know what are the reasons why you're failing them, you're not delivering the value proposition, what are the steps to enhance or compensate or repair that failure? So that's the value proposition part of the talk. There are a bunch of questions there. There's a lot more depth that we go into when we're doing this in a workshop. And obviously, I don't have your actual business models in front of me, but do feel free to ask particular questions in the chat. So when we look at the revenue assessment, this is down here in the bottom right hand corner, and let's give it a nice pretty color. Let's make it blue. The blue has no real significance other than I'm told that it goes quite well with purple. Yes, no need to talk about my lack of colour coordination. Right, so the first question is, how strong are your margins? Do you have strong margins or do you have weak margins? Again, that should be quite clear. You can look at that either on an absolute basis, that yes, my margins are 1%, those are pretty weak, where somebody else is in software and they got 40%, that's nice and strong. Or you can look at them in terms of against your competitors. Have your competitors got stronger margins than you? If so, why have they got stronger margins? Is it something else in the business model? Is it the way, for example, that they're delivering the key activities because they've got a very much cost driven structure? Or is it because they've got amazingly strong value propositions that allow them to charge a premium to the customer base? Or is it because you've got very efficient channels that drive down your CAC, your customer acquisition cost, or increase the lifetime value that you're able to extract from customers? So how strong are your revenues? Absolutely. And how strong are they relative to your competitors? Have you got a clear answer to that? If not, how do you go out and have a look at your business? How do you find out the answers to that? Next question is, are your revenues predictable? There are generally a couple of reasons why your revenue streams aren't predictable. Apple has relatively bumpy revenue streams for its iPhone hardware, because they do, I think it's 2 launches a year. So people tend to stop buying as it comes up to a launch, and then there is a big set of purchases at launch time, and then that slowly tails off. The revenues from the App Store, by contrast, are relatively stable throughout the year, and purchases of computers tend to happen towards the end of the tax year as companies use up their budgets, or towards Christmas, when they are gifts for yourself and your family. So there's a lot of seasonality. This all affects the lumpiness of your revenue, and obviously, just like an insurance company, you want nice, smooth revenue, because that is obviously makes it a lot easier to manage your cash flow, to manage your business. So how predictable is it? Is there anything that you can be tweaking in the rest of the business model that will improve that predictability? Can you increase the frequency of purchases? Can you be tweaking deals in downtimes to improve sales there without cannibalizing other periods of the year? Okay, the next thing, the recurring revenues and frequent repeat purchases. Yeah, I think I've forgotten now, honestly, that I'm on my 7th or 8th iPhone. I'm certainly on my 4th iPad. Yeah, that's a nice recurring revenue stream for Apple. Yeah, because they've got the loyalty coming from the brand and status that the value proposition delivers to me. Yeah, where do you get your revenue streams and repeat purchases from? Is it you've got something that you can sell on a 6 monthly basis, like a light bulb, as it dies? Or do you have to come up with a new product or service every 6 months once somebody has consumed the previous one? A bit like if you're creating courses, yeah, so once somebody has completed one course, you then need to sell them another course. And that's possible when you've got loyal customers, less so if you haven't, because once they've eaten it, they're going to be a little bit more shy if it didn't taste great. Then again, the next question, how diversified are your revenue streams? Have you got very diversified revenue streams, or do you depend on a single revenue stream? Many small businesses are simply focused on one revenue stream. If we look at Apple over the last 20-30 years, to start off with, they were very, very focused on product sales. That was the original Apple Macintosh computers. Then they started adding the software to support the computers, and then as we came into the modern era with iPods and iPhones and iPads, they started offering the App Store, another set of services. And finally, recently, you have iTunes subscriptions, you have video rentals and subscriptions, which is all diversifying their income streams. Even if Apple never sold another iPhone or never came up with another model, they've still got a very nice, stable software and media consumption income streams to keep them going. And as a result, they're far less vulnerable to changes in the market and the environment. Think of what happened to Nokia. Apple came along, suddenly their hardware business was dead, and they had no significant other revenue streams to make up for that. Okay, so revenue streams, are they sustainable? So when I go out onto the internet, I see a lot of companies that you go out and you buy their services once, and they are designed to extract as much money as possible through squeezes, landing pages, very, very manipulative marketing. Yeah, you're selling to somebody once. Is your business model like that, or is it more sustainable? Again, right at the opposite end of the spectrum, companies like Vale, a copper miner, or people like Exxon, an oil miner? No, an oil company. They've got limited resources, and one of the key things that investors look for them is how sustainable are their oil fields, and they look at the number of replacement barrels that they are adding into their portfolio each year through exploration and development. So how sustainable are the ways that you're going to make money? So I was talking to a guy the other day selling GPRD, which is part of the new European privacy laws. That's his business. It's got 2 to 3 years of big growth, then it will tail off. Then he's going to have to repurpose his business to a slightly different segment of the privacy market, because GPRD is no longer going to be of interest to most customers. Right, the next question, when do you collect revenue? At its bluntest, you collect the revenue before you incur expenses, or do you incur expenses before you collect revenue? There are many different ways of doing this, and many different industries do it. Consultancy, you often pay up front. Supermarkets, you have to a very big spend on the actual building the supermarket, but then you collect the revenue, and then 90 or 120 days later, you're actually paying all your expenses, which gives you 90 days of interest-free credit to finance your operations. This is somebody right at the other end. People like Boeing and Airbus are having to put in 10 to 20 billion dollars of R&D before they can sell a single plane. Now, they may be able to pre-sell one, but the sums that they're getting from pre-selling are absolutely trivial. So if your expenses occur after your revenue, is there any way that you can be changing your model to get them to occur earlier in the cycle? Is there something that you could be, say, offering? Let's change the color here. Could you be offering increased value at that stage, so the user increased value there, so that you're able to get revenue earlier in your cash cycle? Right. Do you charge what customers are willing to pay for, or do you not charge as much as they're willing to pay? This comes down to your savviness on the pricing, often a lot of experimentation. Ronan, as it happens, was telling me a great story about how when he was starting, or when he was running his previous business, he was getting 5-star reviews, And he was realizing, well, if everyone's giving me a 5-star review, I must be delivering too much value. So he slowly increased the price until he was getting an average of a 4.7 or a 4.8 star review. As a result, he was able to skim, to capture the cream at the top of the market and make a lot more money without actually having to deliver any more value or increase his costs. And that's obviously a great thing to be doing that can be increasing your margins. And it's very difficult to know this because partly customers don't tell you clearly, oh, you could have actually charged me a lot more. Sometimes people do that. And you think, aha, that's a learning. But why didn't you tell me that right at the beginning rather than at the end when they've paid up fully? So ask yourself that question, that do we charge what customers are really willing to pay for? And certainly in my business over the years, I've managed to increase prices significantly as I've got greater understanding of my customers, what their needs are, what their wants are, and the value that I can deliver for them. So for me, $1,000 of my time may translate into, say, $50,000 of increased revenue. Am I right to charge $1,000, or should I be charging 20% of the increased sales? The customer is still doing exceptionally well as a result, and I'm no longer undercharging. And this is the sort of thing that you should be looking at. Okay, the final question on the revenue assessment: do our pricing mechanisms capture the full willingness to pay, or do they leave money on the table? So I mix this one up a little bit. I think the difference between these two questions, we charge what customers are really willing to pay for, or our pricing mechanisms capture the full willingness to pay, is the pricing is a lot more focused on how much money can you extract, and the first one is on the value that they're willing to pay for. So the one, if you like, the extraction is far more of a manipulative, a tactical approach. The other one is looking at it far more strategically and seeing what opportunities are there for upselling real value to the customer, whereas the other is increasing the conversion rate, for example. Right, so that is the revenue assessment. And now the third section is looking at the cost structure. Again, we're going to go back to the same sort of question that we asked at the beginning of the revenue assessment. How predictable are your costs? Unpredictable costs is an incredible pain and a nightmare. I've run a startup where our costs were all over the place, as much due to the structure of the industry as anything that we could or couldn't do to resolve it. And it makes budgeting very, very difficult because you don't know how much money you're going to have in your bank account at the time. So one of the key things for stable business growth is getting that cash flow smooth. One great way, very simple way of doing this is you're looking at, say, all the SaaS subscriptions that you have, and if you're paying $50 here, $100 there, $300 there, and you bundle them all up, and you can make quite nice, usually 20-25% savings by paying for 12 months at once. However, if they're all coming in at one point during the year, 1 month you could be paying $5,000 in SaaS subscriptions, which would be, whoa, a very big cash flow hit. And if you haven't got enough cash immediately to hand, you're then looking at expensive bank accounts, or disruption to the smooth running of your business. If you can manage it systematically across all the months, that's far, far easier to manage if you don't have a substantial cash buffer floating around. So are your costs predictable? Are your costs unpredictable? What can you do to increase predictability? Next question, and I think we're with Apple, just to come back to here, Apple's pretty much got some fairly stable costs. We talked about it a little bit with the revenue. Their costs are leading in most cases the revenue that they're making, because whilst the manufacturing, they can pay Foxconn 60, 90, 120 days after they've received the cash from their retailers or from customers for them, they've still got to put in all the upfront design and development work for this. For Apple, is the cost structure correctly matched to the business model, or is the cost structure, does it diverge from the rest of the business model? So this is one of these things. I was working with a customer recently, and they had very, oops, let me just make sure I'm not selecting too many things. They had very expensive customer relationships for a relatively low priced mass market product, and they were really unwilling to cut the cost of the customer relationship, because they felt that it gave them a competitive advantage. But what it did do was it really inflated the cost structure, and as a result very much reduced the revenues that as a company that they could the margins that as a company they could achieve. So what you're looking for here is, okay, compared to the industries, are there any parts of my cost structure that are very expensive? If I have very expensive parts of the business to run or operate, how much are they really contributing to the bottom line, either in revenue or in an exceptional value proposition? Okay, the next question, are operations, are they cost efficient or are they cost inefficient? So Apple outsources a lot of the cost efficiency to its manufacturing partners in China and Taiwan, driving down a lot of the costs. One of the things that I remember hearing about Steve Jobs was when people were giving him grief about the iPod and the iPhone 1, about how clunky they were and some of the features that they didn't like. He had an iPhone 4 sitting in his office that was ready to go. The trouble was that the costs of all the components were way too high, and he needed to go through 2 to 3 intermediate steps to scale up the manufacturing to drive down the costs to make these actually sustainable. So when you're looking to ask whether our operations are cost efficient, how much can you be managing out the costs in the system? How much can you be looking at ways of getting rid of the excess costs? When you're at the startup, often you will say, okay, I do this, this, and this because it is quick and easy, and you get a solution without having to think too much that does 90% of what you want to do, but it's more expensive. As you get more scale, as you're delivering to, say, hundreds of customers on a regular basis or thousands of customers on a regular basis, you can start using different sort of pieces of software that may have $1,000 a month price tag, but they deliver far more per unit cost than your cheap and cheerful $35 and $40 a month software packages. For example, I use Canva. I pay $10 a month. I don't pay the $60 or $70 a month for Adobe Creative Studio because I don't need it. As you grow, though, start looking at different ways of becoming more cost efficient. Final questions is, how can I benefit from economies of scale. Yeah, so Foxconn factories, they have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of employees in them. So you get vast economies of scale. I mean, seriously, you can buy a lot of land. You can have one or two very large factories producing hundreds of millions of units per year. The unit cost, as a result, goes down very, very significantly. At the level that we are looking at, we're not going to achieve what Apple's done to that level. But what we can say, what we do know, is most of the economies of scale come from moving from one production to 10. You get a very significant economies of scale then. From 10 to 100, you get another big but smaller jump. 100 to 1,000, another big jump, but smaller again. Most of your big economies come from low production runs as you get to do them better and faster and more effectively. And so my question to you here is, where can you benefit from economies of scale? And the other side of the question is, which parts of your business should be benefiting from economies of scale, but you haven't even thought of looking for them at the present time? So step back, have a look at your business, see where you can find economies of scale. So in this session, wrapping it up now, we've done a quick assessment of the value proposition. We've looked at how can you align your value proposition better with customer needs, increase the network effects of them, find synergies between your products and services, and look at how satisfied your customers are. When we've come down into the revenue area, down in the bottom right hand side, we've looked at the margins, the predictability of your cash flow, how often customers are repeat purchasers, and the sustainability of each of your different revenue streams. We've also asked, when do you collect revenues, before or after expenses, and whether you charge what customers are really willing to pay for, and whether your pricing mechanisms capture all of that potential that customers are willing to pay for. Finally, down in the bottom side here, looking at the cost structure, we've covered whether your costs are predictable or not, and whether your cost structure matches the rest of the business model. Finally, we looked at how cost efficient your operations are, where you can start reducing unit costs as you get larger, and also where you can start, as you grow, benefiting from economies of scale, because they're not just for bigger corporations, they have the biggest impact at small and medium enterprises as they're growing. I hope this session's been super useful, and look forward to speaking to you, seeing you again at the next one, when we'll be looking at the back side of your business model canvas. Let me just show you here, and we'll be looking, and let's put it in a nice pink and put it in a range, center back, and we'll be looking at the infrastructure part of the business model canvas. And honestly, we should just bring that down to cover that as well. So look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for popping in. My name is Denis Oakley, and I do strategy for owners, entrepreneurs, and business leaders to help them grow the company and increase the top and bottom lines.